Each evening, in cities and villages, in apartments above busy roads and houses at the end of quiet lanes, the same small retreat begins. Screens dim, conversations shorten, the last cup is washed. A lamp is turned off, and little by little, people surrender their attention to the dark. It is so ordinary that it is easy to overlook how strange it is. For several hours, we become less responsive to the world around us. We lie still, our awareness changes. The sharp boundary between what is outside the mind and what is inside it becomes softer. A person may spend the day moving through a crowded world of messages, tasks, decisions, and faces. Then, without traveling anywhere, that same person enters a place where time behaves differently. Sleep is familiar to all of us, yet familiarity is not explanation. Why would a living creature repeatedly become less alert? Why would an animal pause its search for food, its watch for danger, its work of maintaining itself? Why would the brain, an organ that has spent the day sorting sights and sounds and problems, pass through a sequence of carefully organized states that look nothing like simple rest? For a long time, sleep was described in the language of absence. The body was inactive, the mind was off, the day had stopped. Modern sleep science has made that picture impossible to sustain. Sleep is not one state. It is not a blank interval inserted between two waking days. It has stages, it has rhythms, it has bursts of activity and intervals of deep quiet. It is shaped by an internal timing system, by the length of time we have been awake, by light, by habit, by age, by health, and by the strange fact that the brain never entirely stops being a brain. Tonight, we will take a slow look at that hidden half of life. We will follow the pressure that builds during a waking day. We will meet the body clock that keeps time even when there is no clock on the wall. We will move through the changing landscape of a typical night. The first shallow descent into sleep, the deeper slow waves, the later periods of rapid eye movement, and the private, often impossible theater of dreams. And we will keep one question in view. What is sleep for? Science has learned a great deal about how sleep is organized and what changes when sleep is disturbed. It has strong evidence that sleep matters for attention, learning, memory, mood, and physical health. But the single, final answer to why sleep exists has not been found. It may be that the question is too simple. Sleep may not have one purpose at all. It may be a gathering of many biological tasks, carried out under conditions that waking life cannot easily provide. That uncertainty is not a failure of science. It is part of what makes the subject so interesting. We do not need to turn sleep into a productivity project. We do not need to make every dream carry a hidden message. We can simply notice that each night, the human body performs an old and intricate ritual, one shared with creatures very different from ourselves. A bird settles on a branch. A dog circles twice before lying down. A whale rests one half of its brain at a time. Somewhere beneath the ground, a small mammal curls into a chamber of leaves. Across the planet, organisms with very different lives obey rhythms of activity and quiet. Human sleep belongs to that ancient pattern. But it also carries the marks of a human life, a remembered conversation, a new skill, a worry, a piece of music, a face seen once in passing. The night is not an empty container. It is a period in which the brain and body change their mode of work. To understand sleep, it helps to begin before bedtime. Imagine an ordinary morning. Light enters a room. The body warms slightly. Attention returns. The world feels solid again. During the day, many small demands accumulate. Muscles move. The senses keep sampling the environment. The brain keeps selecting what deserves notice and what can be ignored. By evening, tiredness may feel like a single, simple feeling, but it is the visible result of several systems moving together. One system measures something like need. The longer we have been awake, the more strongly the body tends to press towards sleep. Another system measures time. It does not merely react when the lights go out. It anticipates the regular pattern of day and night. It helps arrange wakefulness and sleep into a rhythm that is close to, but not exactly, 24 hours. The first is often called sleep pressure. The second is the circadian clock. Their interaction is one of the central ideas of modern sleep science. The story of sleep begins there, not with a switch being flipped, but with two quiet forces, one building through the day and the other keeping time in the background. Everyone knows the feeling of a long day settling into the body. It may arrive after hours of concentration, after travel, after work that seems to ask for attention without ever quite ending. At first it can be subtle. A sentence must be read twice. A task takes longer than expected. The mind begins to drift from the room into something softer and less defined. This is not simply a matter of willpower running out. One useful scientific idea is that wakefulness creates a growing need for sleep. The longer a person has been awake, the stronger this homeostatic drive tends to become. In the language of sleep research, this is sometimes called process S, with the S standing for sleep. It is called homeostatic because it describes a tendency toward balance. Time awake adds pressure, sleep reduces it. The word pressure is a metaphor, but it is a helpful one. It is not a physical weight stored in one place. It is a changing condition of the nervous system, reflected in many signals and processes. Researchers can observe part of its pattern in the brain's electrical activity. After extended waking, slow-wave activity during the next period of deep non-REM sleep tends to be stronger. As sleep continues, that slow-wave activity usually declines. In everyday language, the idea is simple. A waking day leaves a trace. One chemical often discussed in this context is adenosine. It is involved in many ordinary cellular processes, and levels of adenosine-related signaling in parts of the brain are linked with the growing tendency towards sleep during sustained wakefulness. Caffeine works partly by blocking adenosine receptors. That is one reason it can make a tired brain feel less sleepy for a while. But adenosine is not a little bottle of tiredness. It is not the sole cause of sleep, and sleep is not explained by a single chemical. The brain systems that regulate wakefulness and sleep are distributed across several regions, using many signaling molecules. The useful lesson is not that one substance orders us to bed. It is that being awake changes the conditions under which the brain operates. The longer the day continues, the more that change matters. And yet, sleepiness does not rise in a perfectly straight line. Many people have noticed an odd moment late in the evening. They may have been tired earlier, then suddenly feel more alert. A second wind seems to arrive. This is one reason sleep cannot be understood through pressure alone. There is another force at work, the internal system that organizes time. In the early 1980s, the sleep researcher Alexander Borb, A. Copyright, Lie described a model that brought these two ideas together. One process represented the homeostatic need for sleep. The other represented circadian timing. The model did not claim that the brain literally contains two labeled dials. It offered a way to understand the shape of human sleep and wakefulness. The first process rises while we are awake and falls while we sleep. The second follows a daily rhythm. It can promote alertness at some times and make sleep more likely at others. It is influenced by the outside world, especially by light, but it is not created from scratch each morning. It is an internal rhythm that is continually adjusted. Together, these processes help explain why a person can be extremely tired after a poor night of sleep, yet still find it difficult to fall asleep at an unusual hour. They also help explain why sleep can feel easier at one time of night than another, even when the total amount of waking has been similar. The body is not merely asking, "How long have you been awake?" It is also asking, "What time does the world seem to be?" This coordination matters because life on Earth has always been organized by a changing environment. Light and darkness arrive in a repeating sequence. Temperatures rise and fall. Food, movement, predators, and social activity have their own rhythms. An organism that can anticipate those changes has an advantage over one that only reacts after they have arrived. The word circadian comes from Latin roots, meaning roughly around a day. A circadian rhythm is an internally generated rhythm that lasts close to 24 hours. It is not exact in the way a quartz watch is exact. It has to be adjusted. It has to listen, in a sense, to the outside world. The strongest signal for that adjustment is light. Light does more than allow us to see. Special cells in the eye send information about environmental brightness to brain systems involved in keeping time. Morning light, evening light, regular routines, meals, activity, and social habits can all contribute to the timing of the day. In sleep research, environmental signals that synchronize the internal clock are sometimes called Zeitgebers, a German word meaning time givers. The name is rather lovely. The world gives time to the body. But the body also carries time within it. If a person is removed from ordinary clocks and kept away from the natural pattern of daylight, daily rhythms do not simply vanish. They tend to continue, though their timing can drift. This persistence helped establish that circadian rhythms are not merely learned habits, they are part of biology. The first clues came from many forms of life. Plants opened and closed their leaves on regular schedules. Insects emerged at familiar times. Animals maintained patterns of activity even in controlled conditions. The rhythm was not simply a response to sunrise. Something inside the organism was keeping track. For a long time, no one knew how. Then, through experiments with fruit flies, a set of discoveries began to reveal that the clock could be found not only in behavior or in a region of the brain, but in the changing activity of genes and proteins inside cells. The circadian clock is easy to imagine as a small metronome hidden somewhere behind the eyes. In reality, it is both more complicated and more elegant. There are important clock systems in the brain, including a small region of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This region receives information connected to light and helps coordinate daily rhythms across the body. But it is not the only place where timing happens. Many cells and tissues have their own clock-like molecular machinery. The body is less like a building with one clock in its entrance hall and more like a city whose districts all keep time, while receiving a shared signal from a central square. The molecular story became clear through work that at first might have seemed far removed from human sleep. In the 1970s, researchers Seymour Benzer and Ronald Konopka studied fruit flies whose daily patterns were unusual. Some seemed to run on a shorter schedule. Others followed a longer one. Some appeared to lose the regular rhythm almost entirely. The experiments pointed to a gene that affected the clock. It was named period. Over the following decades, Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, Michael Young, and many other researchers uncovered more of the mechanism. The work was recognized with the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2017. The essential idea is a feedback loop. A gene helps produce a protein. The protein gradually accumulates. When enough of it is present, it helps reduce the activity that led to its own production. Its level then falls. With the restraint removed, the process can begin again. The details are more intricate than this simple description, involving several genes, proteins, delays, chemical modifications, and signals from the environment. But the broad pattern is one of self-regulating oscillation. The clock is made from a cycle of making and limiting. This is not a human invention copied by biology. It is a biological solution, shaped by evolution, for tracking a world that changes predictably. The discoveries in fruit flies did not mean that humans use exactly the same molecules in exactly the same way, but they revealed principles that are deeply shared across organisms. In humans, related molecular feedback loops help create rhythms in gene activity, hormone release, body temperature, metabolism, and the timing of sleep and wakefulness. The presence of an internal clock does not mean that every person is identical. It does not mean that everyone becomes sleepy at the same hour or wakes with the same ease. There are individual differences in timing, preference, age, environment, and life circumstance. A biological clock is an organizer, not a moral schedule. Still, it helps explain why the night can feel like more than the absence of day. As evening arrives, the internal conditions of the body change. Core body temperature follows a daily rhythm. Hormones shift, alertness changes its texture. The brain does not simply notice darkness and decide to stop. It is preparing, over many hours, for a different mode of life. The homeostatic need for sleep and the circadian clock meet at this threshold. When they align, sleep often comes more easily. When they pull in different directions, sleep can feel oddly distant. A person may be tired from a long day, while their internal timing still supports wakefulness. Or a person may feel sleepy at an unusual hour, because sleep pressure has grown so strong that it overwhelms the usual rhythm. This interaction is why sleep researchers resist simple explanations. There is no single sleep button. Wakefulness itself is actively maintained by networks in the brainstem, hypothalamus, and basal forebrain. Sleep emerges when wake-promoting systems change their activity and sleep-promoting systems gain influence. It is a transition, not a collapse. At bedtime, the world may become quiet, but in the brain, a carefully arranged change is beginning. The first signs can be easy to miss. Thoughts loosen their sequence. The mind starts to make small jumps. A sound in the room may seem both near and far away. The muscles relax. The sharpness of the day begins to blur. Then, without any obvious boundary, the waking brain enters the first stage of sleep. The first stage of non-REM sleep is a borderland. It is often called Stage 1 or N1. It is the transition from wakefulness to sleep. It is usually brief, sometimes only a few minutes. But it has a distinctive quality familiar to anyone who has drifted towards sleep on a train, in a quiet lecture, or in the first stillness of a dark room. The mind may produce fragments rather than full thoughts. An image may arrive without explanation. A remembered voice may seem present for a moment. Some people experience the sudden sensation of falling, followed by a small muscle jerk. These experiences can occur as the brain changes the way it processes the world. In a sleep laboratory, the transition can be observed with several kinds of measurements. Small sensors placed on the scalp record the electrical activity of the brain. Other sensors measure eye movements, muscle tone, breathing, and heart activity. This collection of measurements is called polysomnography, a long word for a detailed record of sleep. The record does not reveal the private feeling of falling asleep. It does not know whether a person is dreaming of a garden, a train station, or nothing at all. But it can show patterns. It can distinguish periods when the brain is awake and alert from periods when its activity takes on the rhythms associated with different stages of sleep. As stage 1 gives way to stage 2, the sleeper is more securely asleep. Stage 2, often called N2, occupies a substantial portion of a typical night. In its electrical patterns, researchers see features known as sleep spindles and K-complexes. The names sound technical because they come from the visual appearance of the signals on a recording. A sleep spindle is a brief burst of faster rhythmic activity. A K-complex is a large, distinct wave that can occur spontaneously or in response to a sound. Scientists continue to study exactly how these patterns contribute to sleep stability and memory. What matters for our quiet journey is that the sleeping brain is not merely becoming less active in every possible sense. It is changing its pattern of activity. It is organizing itself differently. External sounds may still reach the brain. A door may close somewhere in the house. Rain may begin against a window. A car may pass on a distant road. But the meaning of those sounds changes. The sleeping brain becomes less likely to treat each small event as a reason to wake fully. That ability is useful. If every shift in the environment brought a person back to complete alertness, sleep would be fragile indeed. Yet the system is not sealed. A sound with particular importance, such as a baby crying, an alarm, or one's own name, can be more likely to break through. Sleep is a reduced responsiveness, not a complete disconnection. Beyond stage 2 lies stage 3, often called deep sleep or slow wave sleep. On an electrical recording, slow waves are broad and powerful rhythms. They reflect large groups of brain cells moving between more active and less active states in a coordinated pattern. Slow wave sleep is most prominent earlier in the night, when the homeostatic need for sleep is relatively high. The phrase deep sleep can create a misleading image, as though the sleeper has sunk to the bottom of a still pool and nothing at all can reach them. In reality, sleep remains dynamic. Breathing continues. The heart continues. The brain continues to regulate the body and respond selectively to the environment. But waking someone from slow-wave sleep can be more difficult than waking them from lighter stages, and the person may feel briefly disoriented. There is a tenderness in that disorientation. For a few moments, the familiar map of the day has not yet returned. The name of the room, the time, the immediate purpose of being a wackier Euros, these may need to be rebuilt. Then, gradually, the world comes back into focus. Slow-wave sleep is not evenly spread across the night. It is concentrated in the earlier cycles, especially after a long stretch of wakefulness. Later in the night, periods of slow-wave sleep usually become less prominent. Other phases take up more space. This is one reason a night is not simply 8 or 7 or 6 hours of one unchanging state. It has a shape. The shape repeats, but never perfectly. A person moves through stages in cycles. A typical cycle may last around 80 to 100 minutes. Across a night, many people experience 4 to 6 of these cycles. The exact number and timing vary. Small awakenings can occur between them, often so briefly that they are not remembered in the morning. These brief awakenings are worth pausing over because they reveal something important. Good sleep is not necessarily a perfectly smooth descent into unconsciousness, followed by a perfectly smooth return. Human sleep architecture includes transitions. The brain is continually adjusting the balance between stable sleep and readiness to respond. Sometimes a person will remember waking in the night and assume that something has gone wrong. Sometimes a remembered awakening does point to a disturbance worth discussing with a clinician, especially if it is frequent or distressing. But the simple fact of a brief transition is not, by itself, evidence of failure. The sleeping brain has always moved through changing states. The first half of a typical night is often rich in non-REM sleep, including slow-wave sleep. As the night continues, another state begins to take longer turns on the stage. It is one of the strangest states in biology. The eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids. The brain's electrical activity becomes, in some ways, more similar to waking activity. The body's large muscles are normally held in a state of reduced tone, and vivid dreaming becomes more likely. This is rapid eye movement sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep, usually shortened to REM sleep, was identified in the 20th century through careful observations of sleeping people. Researchers noticed that sleepers passed through periods in which their eyes moved beneath their lids. When participants were awakened during these episodes, they were often more likely to report vivid dreams. The discovery helped overturn the older idea that sleep was simply a quiet shutting down. During REM sleep, the brain is active. Electrical recordings can look more wake-like than the broad, slow waves of deep non-REM sleep. The eyes move in quick bursts. Breathing and heart rate can become more variable. The brain's regulation of body temperature is reduced compared with wakefulness and non-REM sleep. At the same time, most of the body's large voluntary muscles are normally in a state of atonia, meaning very low muscle tone. This does not include the muscles needed for breathing or the muscles that move the eyes. But it does mean that the sleeping body is usually prevented from acting out the movements of an imagined dream. It is a remarkable arrangement. The mind may be producing a scene of running, climbing, speaking, arriving somewhere impossible. Yet the body remains largely still in bed. REM sleep is often described as the stage of dreaming. That is useful as a first introduction, but it should be handled carefully. Dreams can occur outside REM sleep as well. Reports from non-REM sleep are often less vivid or less story-like, especially earlier in the night, but the boundary is not absolute. The mind can create experience in more than one sleeping state. And not everyone remembers dreams in the same way. Dream recall depends on many things, including whether a person wakes during or soon after a dream, how quickly attention shifts to the day, and individual differences in memory and interest. A person who says they never dream may simply be someone who rarely remembers the dreams that occurred. Across a typical night, REM periods tend to become longer. The early cycles may contain only short episodes of REM. Later, as slow-wave sleep becomes less dominant, REM can occupy more time. This is one reason the final hours of sleep can have a different character from the first. It is tempting to turn this fact into a hierarchy, to say that one stage is the truly important one and another is merely preparation. Sleep research does not support that simple story. Non-REM and REM are different, and both are part of the architecture of normal sleep. Their roles overlap, their mechanisms interact. The exact contribution of each stage to learning, emotion, recovery, and other functions remains an active field of study. What can be said with confidence is that the brain moves through an organized sequence rather than resting in one uniform condition. Imagine a long building at night, with rooms that are lit in turn. In one room, the sounds of the day are fading, and the brain is becoming less responsive to the outside world. In another, slow waves rise and fall across large networks. In another, the muscles are quiet while the eyes move rapidly and the brain constructs elaborate private scenes. The person in bed may experience the whole night as a blank stretch of time, but the sleeping brain has been traveling through several distinct landscapes. The timing of these landscapes is shaped by both sleep pressure and the circadian clock. Early in the night, the need for deep non-REM sleep is strong. Later, as that need is partly satisfied, the conditions become more favorable for longer REM periods. Circadian timing also influences when REM is most likely to occur. The two processes do not simply take turns, they interact. This interaction can explain why an interrupted night sometimes feels unlike a shortened night in a simple arithmetic sense. Sleep is not a pile of identical minutes. The placement of sleep within the night changes the mixture of stages a person experiences. That does not mean anyone should look anxiously at a clock and calculate what they are missing. In fact, sleep science is most useful when it replaces superstition with understanding, not when it gives the mind another problem to solve at 2 in the morning. The broad point is enough. The night has a structure. Early sleep often carries more slow-wave activity. Later sleep often carries more REM. Brief transitions occur. The brain remains alive to some signals while ignoring countless others. The body changes its regulation as it moves between states. And through all of it, the sleeper is not absent. They are participating in a biological process that has been refined over a very long evolutionary history. What then is all this changing activity accomplishing? One of the clearest places to look for an answer is memory. Each day gives the brain more experience than it can preserve in full. Words are heard, routes are learned, faces are recognized. A new movement is practiced, a problem is considered and then forgotten. Some impressions will fade quickly, others will become part of a lasting store of knowledge. Sleep appears to play an important part in that sorting and stabilizing process. But as with so much in sleep science, the most accurate story is not that the brain simply presses a button marked save. Memory is not a cabinet full of perfect recordings. It is active, reconstructive, distributed across brain systems, and shaped by later experience. Sleep seems to support the transformation of recent experience into more durable forms. It may help the brain replay, strengthen, integrate, and sometimes reshape what has been learned. The details are subtle, and they lead us to a sleeping brain that may be far busier than it appears from the outside. When we learn something new, the experience does not enter the brain as a finished memory. At first, it can be fragile. A name has been heard once. A sequence of movements has been practiced. A route through an unfamiliar place has been followed. A fact has been read, understood, and perhaps only partly retained. Over time, some of these experiences become easier to retrieve. They connect with older knowledge. They become less dependent on the exact moment in which they were learned. This gradual stabilizing and reorganization is often called memory consolidation. Sleep researchers have found strong evidence that sleep after learning can benefit later memory performance. The effect has been studied across different kinds of learning: words and facts, motor skills, spatial tasks, and emotionally significant material. The exact pattern varies with the task, the timing, the age of the participants, and the kind of sleep being measured. But the broad result is consistent enough to be important. Sleep is not empty time between learning and remembering. One influential idea is that recently active patterns in the brain can be reactivated during sleep. In animals, researchers have observed patterns of neural activity during exploration that appear again during later sleep or quiet rest. In humans, brain imaging and electrical recordings have offered related evidence that recently learned material is processed during sleep. The language of replay is useful, as long as it is not taken too literally. The brain is not projecting the day back in perfect order like a film. Memory itself is not a flawless recording. Reactivation may involve fragments, associations, and networks rather than a complete scene. A new experience can be connected with older knowledge. Details may be strengthened, altered, or allowed to fade. What remains is not necessarily a copy of what happened. It is a memory shaped for later use. This helps explain why a night's sleep can sometimes make a difficult problem feel different in the morning. It does not mean that sleep is a magical problem-solving machine. It does not guarantee insight, but it may provide conditions in which information is no longer competing with the immediate demands of the world. During wakefulness, attention is pulled outward. A new sound may require a response. A message arrives. A task has a deadline. The brain must keep returning to the present. During sleep, that demand changes. The outside world is not entirely excluded, but it is no longer the main organizer of mental life. This may allow the brain to revisit patterns of activity that mattered during the day. The result can be a quieter kind of work, less concerned with acting now, more concerned with integrating what has already happened. Some sleep researchers describe this in terms of communication between the hippocampus and the cortex. The hippocampus is important for forming certain kinds of new memory, particularly memories of events and places. Over time, memories become represented across wider cortical networks. Sleep may help support this longer process of redistribution and stabilization. The full mechanism is still being worked out. Brains are not simple machines, and a process observed in one kind of memory cannot automatically be applied to every kind of learning. Still, the association between sleep and later performance is one of the strongest clues we have about why sleep matters. Sleep also seems relevant to attention and learning the following day. When sleep is restricted or disrupted, people often find it harder to focus, react quickly, learn new material, and regulate emotion. These effects are not a moral judgment on anyone who is tired. They are reminders that wakefulness depends on what happened before it. The quality of the day is partly prepared during the night. This does not mean a person should turn every night into a test. Human sleep varies. A single imperfect night is part of ordinary life. The purpose of understanding sleep is not to create more pressure around it. It is simply to recognize that the brain's ability to pay attention, learn, make decisions, and respond to the world is connected to a process that often remains invisible. The connection between sleep and emotion is similarly important and similarly complex. People often notice that exhaustion changes the emotional texture of a day. Small frustrations may feel larger, patience may be shorter. A difficult decision may seem more difficult still. Research has linked insufficient sleep with changes in emotional regulation and reactivity. But it would be too simple to say that one particular dream stage cleans away the feelings of the day. Emotion, memory, sleep, and waking experience overlap in many ways. Some memories are emotional because they matter. Some dreams are emotional because the mind draws on material that matters. Some nights bring vivid dreams after an unusual day. Other nights bring no remembered dreams at all. The science offers patterns, not a script for every individual mind. There is another popular claim about sleep that deserves a gentle correction. People sometimes speak as though the brain switches off at night so it can recharge, like a phone placed on a table. The comparison captures one small idea: sleep is restorative. But it misses the central fact: the sleeping brain remains active. It changes states. It regulates the body. It processes information. It produces rhythms that do not occur in the same form during wakefulness. Sleep is restoration through activity of a different kind. That difference is especially visible when we turn from memory in general to the most memorable product of sleep itself: the dream. Dreams are among the oldest puzzles of human life. Before sleep laboratories, before electrical recordings, before the discovery of REM sleep, people noticed that the night could produce experiences as vivid as waking. A person could speak to someone long gone, walk through a house that never existed, arrive in a familiar place with impossible geography, feel fear, relief, embarrassment, joy, or wonder with complete conviction. Then they would wake. The room would be quiet. The dream would begin to dissolve. What had seemed urgent a moment earlier could become difficult to describe. A face would lose its name. A journey would lose its map. Only a feeling might remain. It is understandable that dreams have attracted so many explanations. They have been treated as messages, warnings, wishes, fragments of memory, signs from outside the self, or meaningless noise. Modern science has narrowed some questions and opened others. It can tell us that vivid dreaming often occurs during REM sleep. It can show that the brain is active during REM. It can show that the muscles are normally inhibited while the eyes move rapidly. It can compare dream reports from different stages of sleep. It can study how recent experiences sometimes appear in dreams. But it cannot yet provide one proven answer to the question: what are dreams for? One leading family of ideas connects dreaming with memory processing. If the brain reactivates recent experiences during sleep, perhaps the shifting, fragmentary material of dreams reflects part of that process. Research has shown that recent learning can influence dream content, and some studies have found associations between dreaming about a task and later memory performance. But an association is not a final explanation. Dreams are difficult to study because they are private, fleeting, and usually reported only after waking. Memory for a dream can change in the act of telling it. The same dream may be remembered differently at breakfast than it was at the moment of waking. People vary greatly in what they recall. Experiments can be elegant, but the phenomenon itself refuses to sit still. A recent review of the field concluded that evidence linking dream content directly to sleep-dependent memory consolidation remains mixed. That does not make the question unimportant. It makes it properly scientific. A good question can survive uncertainty. Another idea is that dreams help the mind simulate possibilities, rehearse threats, process emotions, or explore social situations. These ideas can feel intuitively persuasive because dreams often contain danger, relationships, conflict, and strange combinations of ordinary life. But intuitive familiarity is not the same as proof. Different theories may each capture part of the truth, or dreams may sometimes be a byproduct of other brain processes rather than a feature with one separate function. It may be useful to separate two kinds of meaning. A dream can be meaningful to the person who had it. It can bring a memory to the surface, create an image that lingers, or reveal a feeling that was difficult to notice in daylight. That personal meaning is real as experience. But personal meaning is not the same as a universal scientific rule. A dream about a childhood home does not prove that all dreams exist to recover the past. A dream about flying does not establish a hidden wish. The dream may matter and still remain mysterious. There is freedom in allowing that mystery. The brain is a pattern-making organ. During sleep, it is no longer receiving and responding to the world in the same way. Memory fragments, sensations, emotions, expectations, and old associations can meet under altered conditions. The result can feel like a story, although it may have been assembled without a writer. Dreams often have the logic of a place one recognizes only while inside it. In a dream, a familiar friend may also be a stranger. A room may contain a doorway that leads to a different decade. A problem may be urgently important, but no one can explain what the problem is. These contradictions usually do not disturb the dreaming mind in the way they would disturb the waking mind. The part of us that checks for consistency appears to be operating differently. When we wake, the ordinary editor returns. The dream becomes odd. We wonder why we accepted it. This contrast is one of the pleasures of studying sleep. It shows that consciousness is not one fixed thing. The mind can be awake, drowsy, lightly asleep, deeply asleep, dreaming, briefly aroused, and fully alert. Each state has its own relationship to memory, sensation, movement, and time. Dreaming is not an escape from biology. It is one of biology's most intimate experiences. Yet even after we have followed the body clock, the cycles, the slow waves, the rapid eye movements, the memory reactivation, and the dream reports, the largest question remains. Why should a creature need this at all? From an evolutionary point of view, sleep is expensive. An animal that sleeps cannot search for food in the same way. It cannot watch as carefully for danger. It may be less able to respond to changes in its environment. For a long time, this has made sleep appear almost paradoxical. If survival rewards alertness, why would sleep be so widespread? One answer is that sleep must provide benefits large enough to outweigh its risks. But that answer only moves the question one step further. What benefits? There may not be one. Sleep may support many processes at once. The regulation of brain networks, the consolidation of memory, the maintenance of attention, the coordination of metabolic and hormonal rhythms, the adjustment of emotional responses, and the organization of activity across the body. Different stages may contribute in different ways. Different species may rely on sleep differently. The functions of sleep may have changed and diversified across evolutionary time. The desire for one neat explanation is understandable. Human beings like a single key for a locked door. But biology often works through overlapping systems rather than one purpose. The heart does not beat for only one reason that can be separated from everything else. The immune system does not have one task. Sleep may belong to that same kind of complexity. It may be less like a single repair shop that opens each night, and more like a change of shift across an entire city. Some systems slow down. Others take the opportunity to work differently. Information is reorganized. Timing signals continue. The body is kept within a changing balance. By morning, the world outside has returned to its familiar demands, and the brain is prepared to meet it again. This is not a disappointing answer. It is an honest one. We know far more about sleep than people knew a century ago. We can record its stages. We can identify molecular clocks. We can observe the effects of sleep loss on attention and learning. We can study the activity of brain networks in animals and humans. We can see that sleep is linked with processes that matter deeply to daily life. And still, the final purpose of sleep remains open. Perhaps that is fitting. Sleep is not an invention we can inspect from the outside. It is a condition we enter every day. The scientist studying sleep must eventually sleep. The person reading about dreams must eventually return to a dream. The instrument can record waves and movements, but it cannot fully capture what it is like to lose the day and find oneself, hours later, return to it. There is one more quiet thought worth keeping. The body clock does not belong only to modern life. It is older than cities, older than lamps, older than writing, older than the first person who asked why the stars appeared each night. It is shaped by the turning of the earth and by the long history of organisms adapting to a repeating world. We live now among artificial light, scheduled work, travel across time zones, messages that arrive at any hour, and clocks that glow from every surface. But beneath these inventions, an older rhythm continues. It is not always easy to hear. It can be interrupted, delayed, ignored, or pushed aside, but it remains part of the living body. Every evening, the two forces begin their familiar conversation. The need for sleep has been growing since morning. The internal clock has been measuring the day. At some point, for most of us, their signals begin to align. Thoughts become less sharp. The room grows quieter. The day releases its grip. Then the stages begin again. The lightest threshold, the stable sleep of stage 2. The broad, slow waves of deep non-REM sleep. The later return of rapid eye movement, the small awakenings. The forgotten dreams, the long work of a brain that is never simply off. The architecture of sleep is not fixed across a human life. An infant's night does not resemble the night of an adult. Newborns spend a much larger share of sleep in REM-like states. In early childhood, slow-wave sleep becomes especially prominent. Through adolescence and adulthood, the amount of slow-wave sleep generally declines. In older age, the pattern of sleep can change again, often becoming lighter or more fragmented. These are broad patterns, not rules that dictate an individual's experience. They are reminders that sleep is not a static feature of the body. It develops with us. The changing pattern makes sense when we remember that sleep is intertwined with learning, growth, brain development, memory, metabolism, and the timing of daily life. A newborn arrives in a world that is almost entirely new. An infant's brain is processing a flood of sensation while learning the rhythms of feeding, light, voices, movement, and comfort. A child is acquiring language, physical coordination, and a growing map of the social world. An adult carries a very different accumulation of habits, memories, and responsibilities. Science can describe the changing architecture. It is more cautious when asked to give one reason for every change. More REM sleep in infancy has prompted ideas about brain development, but a single complete account remains out of reach. As elsewhere in sleep science, the pattern is clear before the ultimate explanation is complete. There is something reassuring in that. No two nights are identical, and no one stage of life owns the only correct way to sleep. Human beings have always slept through changing circumstances, through early years and late years, unfamiliar homes and familiar rooms, winters and summers, quiet periods and difficult ones. The basic rhythms remain, but their expression changes. Even within one ordinary week, sleep can vary. A person may dream vividly one night and recall nothing the next. Deep sleep may feel dense after an exhausting day. A familiar sound may wake someone on one evening and pass unnoticed on another. The laboratory reveals average patterns, but the lived experience of sleep is always individual. That is why sleep science works best when it gives perspective rather than judgment. It can tell us that the body is not passive at night. It can show that sleep is organized. It can explain why the last part of the night often feels different from the first. It can point to the quiet relationship between learning and later rest. But it does not need to turn every waking hour into an exam or every dream into a report card. The point is not to monitor the night more closely. The point is to see it more clearly. When the lights go out, each person carries a long history into sleep, the history of their own day, the history of a body that has changed with age, and the much older history of life adapting to a planet that turns beneath the sun. The rhythms of sleep are personal, but they are never entirely private. They connect a single quiet room to a biological pattern shared across families, generations, and species. In the middle of the night, it may not feel like a grand connection. It may feel like nothing more than a blanket, a dark ceiling, and the soft absence of the day's noise. But beneath that stillness, the old rhythm continues. It continues without needing an audience. It continues when the day has been memorable and when it has been ordinary. It continues in the pauses between thoughts, in the early quiet of non-REM sleep, and in the unfamiliar landscapes of dreams. The body does not ask the night to explain itself before beginning its work. It follows a pattern built from pressure, timing, and change. We began with a room at night. Perhaps the room was familiar, a window reflecting darkness, a soft mechanical sound somewhere in the building, the weight of a blanket, the last trace of the day still present in the mind. Nothing about that room needs to change for sleep to be extraordinary. Behind closed eyes, the body is following rhythms that began long before the room existed. The internal clock continues its near-daily count. Sleep pressure, built through the ordinary hours of waking, begins to ease. Networks in the brain alter their activity. The night takes on its changing shape. There will be periods of light sleep and deeper sleep. There may be dreams, remembered or lost. There may be moments of waking so brief that they leave no mark by morning. There may be memory traces from the day returning in fragments, joining older patterns in ways no one fully sees. Sleep does not need to be explained completely in order to be understood a little better. It is a biological rhythm. It is an active state. It is a foundation for waking life. It is a mystery with well-lit edges and a dark center that science is still exploring. And perhaps that is enough for tonight. The day has its questions. The night has its own kind of answer, not a sentence, but a sequence, not a conclusion, but a cycle. Slowly, the body changes its pace. Slowly, the mind lets the outside world become less urgent. And somewhere within the quiet machinery of the brain, time continues to pass. Outside, the world will keep turning toward morning. Light will return to windows and streets. The body clock will receive its next signal. The pressure of sleep will begin, slowly, to gather once more through another day. For now, there is only this changing night, a rhythm older than language, carried in living cells, moving through a mind that is resting, remembering, dreaming, and preparing in its own quiet way for what comes next.